Hello and welcome to section 5 of this course, importing text file into AutoCAD. So we have exported some of the objects from the AutoCAD into a text file. So in this section we will try to import them back into AutoCAD. So we will learn how to read the file and extract the information from the file. So the first task that we're going to do is to import lines from my file into AutoCAD, followed by the mtext, then the polylines, and again we will import the blocks, this time without attributes, from a file into AutoCAD, and followed by the blocks with attributes. So all of those files that we have extracted from section 4, we will import them back one at a time. So in the next video, we're going to start with importing lines from a file into AutoCAD. I'll see you there. Let us begin with our first task, which is to import lines from a text file, whether it's a CSV or TXT file. In our case, we use the pipe delimited file, which is with a TXT extension. So we will import that file into AutoCAD. So let's just go through the high-level requirements. We have here our text file. This is a pipe delimited file with the start point for X and Y coordinates. And we have also the endpoint, also the X and Y. We have the layer, the line type, and the length. And we will import all of this information. We don't necessarily need the length because all we need is the start point and end point, and then apply the layer and line type respectively. So let's check the high-level flowchart that we have here. The first one is to open the text file and read it from the text file, either TXT or CSV, and read all of this information line by line. Then every single record here that we read, then we can construct the line object based on those start point and end points and apply the layer and line type accordingly. And then we just keep looping until we reach the end of the file. And that's it. So in the next video, we're going to start our coding. I'll see you there. Okay, let's start creating first a new class that will have all our methods to import the text file into AutoCAD. So right click on your project file here and then add class. And we will call this as import file util class. Okay, so we need to import all of our .NET API namespaces. So imports autodesk.autocad.application services, database services, and runtime, and finally the geometry. Okay, so this will be our class, and in the next video we're going to start developing our first method, which is to import lines. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we're going to complete the method called import lines. So let's get started. We're going to create a function. The function returns a value, so we will be returning whatever the result of the process to the calling program, which is the user interface. So public function, and we'll call this as import lines. And we will be needing two parameters here. The first one is the file path as a string, followed by the delimiter as a string. So both of these will be coming from the UI, and we will be returning a string value, which is the result of the process. So if we check our lines.txt file here, this is the one that we have extracted from the from the exporting section. So if we check the content again one more time, we have the start point X and Y, we have the end point X and Y, we have the layer and the line type. So we will create variables to store all of this information. Okay, so let's start with the start point X. That will be a double data type, followed by start point Y, also a double data type, and of course the endpoint X as double and endpoint Y as double. So we have all the variables to store our coordinates, followed by the layer as a string. Next, line type as a string. Okay, next we need to create a variable also for the points. So dim start point as point 3D, and also endpoint as point 3D. And of course we need a variable to store the result. Let's just call that as result as a string. Next we need another variable to read or to store the lines for each record in this file. So we will create a variable. Let's just call that as line rec as a string. And then we will need another variable to store whatever is the content. What I mean is, when we split this record, because they are delimited with a pipe symbol, so when we split all of these, we need a variable to store that, and it will be an array variable. So we will call that as dim line info, and it has to be an array of a string. Okay, and finally we will need a counter as integer, and let's initialize it to 1. The purpose of this counter is just meant for bypassing the first line, which is the header. Since we are reading this file one line at a time, so the first occurrence here is the header, and we are going to ignore that. And this counter just serves as a flag so that we don't need to process this first line. We will start with the second row until the end of the file. Okay, so that will be handled by our counter as the flag. Okay, now that we have most of the variables created, we can start with our try catch block. So let's handle first the catch block area here. So let's just store in a result the message called error encountered, and we concatenate it with the exception message or the error message, and at the bottom we have to return the result. Okay, so since now that we have handled the catch block, we will now focus on the try section. So in here we need to create a document object. So dim doc as document equals application dot document manager dot mdi active document. And since we are updating the database and at the same time reading the external file, we have to make sure that we lock the document. All right, good. Next, we need to declare a database object. So dim db as database equals document.database. And we need a few more variables like the block table. So we need the block table. Let's just call that as bt as block table, because we will be adding objects into AutoCAD database. So we need all these objects. Another one is the block table record. Block table record. Then finally, we need another variable to read the file. So that will be our stream reader variable. So let's just call that as reader as new io dot stream reader. Okay, and it requires a parameter that is the file path, or the file to be read. There you go. So next we can now start our transaction. So using trans as transaction, it would be equal to db.transaction manager dot start transaction. And now we can set the value of our block table record, of our block table, that will be coming from the trans.get object and db.blockTableID open mode for read. And then our block table record now will be equals to trans.get object, and the ID will be coming from the block table, and block table record dot model space and open mode for write. Okay, we'll be writing into the block table record because we are creating an AutoCAD objects or a line objects dynamically from the file that we read. Okay, so now that we have all the necessary variables created, we can now start reading the file. So read the first line. So we will store that in our line rec variable. So line rec would be equal to reader dot read line. Okay, so that is the first line in our text file. And then we can now loop through the file one row at a time. Okay, so to do that, we have to create a do while loop. So do while not line rec is nothing. So for as long as our line rec is reading data, then we keep doing it, keep processing it. Again, here comes the counter. So since we are just reading the first line, which is the header, we'll just do a quick validation here. If CTR equals 1, which is it is 1, then we'll just increment the value of the counter. We'll just increment it. Otherwise, else we'll continue processing the text file. So again, this is just to bypass the first line entry here, which is the header, which we don't need. Okay, so now we are in the content file in the second row. So now we have the line rec. Next, we need to split the record. So we will store that in our line info array variable. So line rec, and we have to use the split method. That is the string split method, and we pass on the delimiter here, whatever the delimiter that we pass into this function, into this method. Okay, so in our case this will be the pipe symbol. So now that we have all the data into the line info array, we can now start assigning that into our variables. So our start point X will be line info 0. That is the first entry. So basically we are splitting all of this information into an array and storing it into the line info array. So to access the array, you just need to provide an index here, which is 0 based, which means that this is the first item in the array, followed by start point Y. That will be the line info index 1. That's the second item in the array. And now we can construct the start point based on those 2 points. Equals new point 3D, then pass the start point X and start point Y, and the Z coordinate will be 0. So we're done with the start point. Now let's do the endpoint. So end PTX equals line info. That will be the third item in the array, which means we have index of 2. And endpoint Y, that will be the line info, and that will be the fourth item in the array. Again, the array is 0 based. Okay, so it starts with 0. Next, we can now compose the endpoint. So endpoint equals new point 3D, which is the endPTX, followed by endpoint Y, and then 0 for the Z axis. Next, we can have the layer, which is equal to the line info item number 5. In this case, we have the index of 4. And finally, we have the line type, which is the content of line info number 6, which is index 5. Okay. All right. So now that we have all of these line properties, we can now create a line. So create a line object and assign the properties. Okay, so in this case we just have to create a line object. So dim line as line equals new line, and now we can start assigning the properties. Line dot start point is equal to our start point. Line dot end point equals endpoint. Then line dot layer equals layer. Oops. And the last one will be line dot line type equals the line type. You can actually assign directly here, but for the purpose of code readability, we just have to break it down so that it's easier for you to understand. Okay, next we have to append the entity into the block table record. So btr.append entity, that would be the line object that we just created, and then we have to add that into the database or into the transaction. So trans.add newly created DB object, line, and true. Add true. There you go. So now we have completed the looping. Of course, for every iteration, we have to make sure that we read the next line. Otherwise, it just keeps reading the first line over and over again. So next, to do that, we have to set the line rec equals to reader that read line. There you go. Okay. And once our loop is complete, which means that we have read all the line records from the file, we can now commit the transaction, and then we can pass on the result equals import completed successfully, or you can compose any message that you want here. Okay, and that should be our completed code for importing all the lines from a text file. So in the next video, we are going to call this method from our user interface. I'll see you there. All right, now that we have our method completed, we can now create a control from our user interface to call this method. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So let's jump over to our file util form object here. So for uniformity of design, we can just copy this group container here and paste it over. And then we can just drag it somewhere here. Too close, or you can just move a little bit. All right. And then let's just get rid of those controls that we don't need for now, and change this text instead of export to file. Let's just put here import from file. And this control, let's just change this to CBO import delimiter. And let's just validate the items. We have here the comma as the first entry, followed by the pipe symbol. Okay, good. Next, for the button here, instead of export lines, we'll say import lines. And we will give this a name as btn import lines. And let's just change the background color to green. And that's it. So yeah, the good thing with just copying it from other existing controls is that you keep the size or the positioning. All you need to do is just change some other properties like the color and the name, and that's it. Okay, so this will be our button control to call the method. In the next video, we will complete the coding for this button. I'll see you there. Okay, let us now complete the code behind this button here to call our import lines method. So let's double click on this button, and now we have here the event handler, the click event handler. So we can start instantiating our import file util class. So let's just call this as util, as new import file util. And also we need a result variable to contain whatever is the outcome of the import. So let's just initialize this as a string also. And then the delimiter as a string. This will be coming from the CBO import delimiter, that selected item. And the next parameter that we need is the file path. So dim file path as string. So instead of, if we go back to the form here, so instead of us having this checkbox or the text box so the user can enter, we can just use a file dialog to allow the user to browse through the Windows Explorer, and the user can select wherever the files is located rather than typing it in the text box. So if you remember from our Excel file, in our Excel util form, if we view the code here, we have a method called get file. So we can just copy this over and put it back, copy it in our file util form, and we can just change some of the parameters here. Let's say instead of Excel files, you can just change it to text files, and this will be asterisk.txt, and that will be, the filter will be txt, or the user can also select the asterisk for all types of files. Okay, so this is complaining because we haven't added the Windows forms. So if we just click on this, it will append a imports at the top of the class, and that should handle it. Okay, so we will use this method for all other exports or all other imports that we will be doing in the upcoming lessons. So now at least we can call this method here and store the whatever the user selected from this method, and store it in our file path variable. So this will be equivalent to get file. Okay. And now that we have all the parameters required, then we can call our import lines method from this util instance here. So util that import lines, this is the only method we have so far, and we pass on the file path and the delimiter. So file path and the delimiter here. However, this method returns the result, so we have to store that in our result equals, and then we'll just display that into our info label. So the text would be the result, and that's it. So we should be ready to test our code, and that's what we're going to do in the next video. I'll see you there. So our code is complete. We should now be ready to test it. Let's just do a quick rebuild here. And it succeeded, so let's start our project. Let's open this drawing. Okay. All right, so before we call our plugin, or before we load our plugin, let's just check some of the lines object that we have in this drawing. This is a line from the deck layer, and also we have here from the stairs layer, and same thing here. So those are just some of the few lines that we can verify later on, these lightweight polylines. So let's get rid of those lines. Let's just erase. Let's just get all the line objects here. 76 found. Okay, so now we don't have a line anymore. Let us load our plugin. Always load. And we should now have a method called, show file util form. And now we have here our button. Okay, so let's give it a try. We'll choose the delimiter here, which is a pipe. Just a word of caution. You have to make sure that you are consistent with the delimiter that you have in your file. So if we check our lines.txt, it is separated by a pipe symbol. Okay, otherwise our code will not understand if you select a different delimiter from here, for example. Okay, so if we click on the import lines, it opens up the dialog for us, so we can select where is that file coming from, and it should be stored in the temp folder. You have your temp folder, and that is the lines.txt. Open it, and it should create all the lines for us already. If we click on the drawing window here, there you go. So we have all the stairs created with the correct layer and line type. Also, we have here the deck. Same thing with the stairs here, and also some of these lines that we have here in the layer deck also. And that's it. So that's how you import the AutoCAD objects from a text file. Okay, I'll see you in the next video.